Alright, welcome back everybody. We're going to do a tomato review today on this tomato right here, and this is called the Zapotec tomato, or Zapotec tomato. Not exactly sure how you say it. I don't have it written out in front of me because I just didn't write it out. Let me back you out a little bit. So we're going to re-review this. I visited it last year or the year before, and so we're growing it again this year. We're going to check it out again and just see if there's any changes between the last time I reviewed it and now. So if you want to see the old video, you can pretty much just do a search on my videos for Zapotec tomato. So let's take a look at some of the tomatoes. So that's the Zapotec. Now I do got a couple more out there that are pretty good size. They're just taking forever to ripen. These ripened already, just about fell off the plant. And the other ones are just sitting there, but they're good size. Or maybe one of them are almost double the size and a little bit flatter and weirder looking, more fluted and everything. So I wish that one was ready, but it's not, and I'm not going to pull it off the plant yet. We're getting close to the time where I may have to take these plants down because it's roughly middle of September now, and we're pretty much done by at least the first week of October. Normally, you get your first frost then. If we don't get it, then let them grow, right? So anyway, here's another one. Weird shape on them. Get this weird shape. Here's the other one. Give a good look at them. Nice belly on them. This is what you would refer to as a preiform shape. It's sort of like a pear shape. Okay, but it's not exactly pear. But it kind of is, so they call it preiform. Here's a look at the inside. And tell me that ain't gorgeous inside. Now that's hollow inside. You can see that it's kind of hollow inside. And so you could use this for a stuffing tomato, but keep in mind that this particular variety of tomato is very juicy, even though it looks hollow. I know it's going to be a wet experience with this because I've been growing this Zapotec for a few years now, and my experience is it's a wet one, and we like it wet. So let's turn on the scale. Let it zero. I'll throw a couple of these tomatoes on there. We got, okay, so it's 4.6 ounces, 4.4, 4.7, and like I said, I have a few more out there that are almost double in size of that. So you could definitely say they're very close to being a pound. They're pretty big. I'll try to get images of them once they ripen, but I can't pull them off because they're green. I just want them to finish on the vine. So generally that is around the average weight for this tomato. So let's go over there and let's do a Brix. Alright, so first thing we want to do is get out the Brix meter, do a little squeeze, a little juice, a little seeds, get the seeds off of there, close our meter up, take a look. It's about 5.5 on the Brix, so it's a little above average. That's good. 5 seems to be like a standard number for most of the tomatoes I'm getting, and this one's slightly above. So why don't we take that tomato and give it a taste test? First off, having grown this tomato now for at least 5 years, I've been growing it on and off throughout the years. It's a good tomato variety. This particular variety tomato, and I've made sauce with this tomato. This tomato really does make a really good tomato sauce. The flavor of the sauce is really, really good. It's an excellent tomato sauce tomato. However, as far as eating it fresh, it's good. You can use it fresh-wise. But I find it a little better as a sauce tomato. That's just my opinion. You can eat it any way you want. Let me back this out a little bit. Okay, so let's get into the sweetness. Generally, the sweetness on this tomato is a little bit below average. I'm going to say about 24, 23, 24 on the sweetness. Wasn't terribly low. It was there, but just a little bit lower on the average number. It wasn't dominantly high. However, so was the tangy. The tangy was generally a pretty mild tanginess. Tanginess, I'm not going to put too much higher than, say, a 26. So they were pretty much really even, just low as far as the whole effect of that. Just generally a low effect. Now, tomato flavor. The interesting part about this tomato is the tomato flavor doesn't have an upfront tomato flavor that strikes you as soon as you eat it. So as soon as you eat it, it's kind of watery and just kind of blanded a little bit. But after you swallow the tomato and it breaks up and you swallow it, the aftertaste really builds up in the backside of your tongue, on the sides of your jaw, like where your teeth are. There's that part right there. You really start to savor this flavor. It really comes in and it really sets itself very nicely and very elegantly, to be quite honest with you, at that region of your tongue. Again, now, keep in mind too, if you're making sauce with this, you could just throw these reviews right out the window. We're talking about in a raw fashion. When you make sauce with them, is it different? You're going to get a different effect. It's the same thing with peppers. When you eat peppers fresh, it's going to be a different effect altogether than when you dry or flake your peppers. It's a totally different pepper experience. So this is very similar with tomatoes. When you make sauce with them, most of this is going to go out the window. Some of it is applicable, but we're talking about for fresh eating. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So the tomato flavor had that effect on you. It really went to the back of the tongue. It really developed there, and it stays there, but it's not very strong, and it does taper off and has a milding effect. Like it just milds itself out of existence. But the tomato has a weird kind of a prominence to it. It just kind of affects different parts of your sensory, your taste sensory in your mouth. You got your lips hold some of that, some of your gums hold that, some of your tongue holds that, and that flavor just kind of lingers around in these areas. And this tomato has a way of getting into these areas and just kind of letting itself sit there until it rolls itself back to the back of your tongue. And that's where the flavor part is really takes its course. That's where you really want to affect the most. This tomato does have a really good effect on doing that. However, the strength of the tomato flavor was prominent, but just not up front. It takes time to melt in your mouth, and it takes time to really get to that part of your tongue and develop its flavor as it's in your mouth. It seems like it took time for it to basically, I don't know how to explain it. It just took time for it to basically melt in your mouth in order for that flavor to develop. It didn't come out right away. So it was almost like a slight delayed effect with it. But the tomato flavor, as far as the number goes, from 0 to 10, where would I be on that number? I would definitely be at about a 5.5 and 6, somewhere in that range. Because, again, I can't say it's low because you first eat it and it's kind of bland a little bit when you first take the bite. However, that aftertaste really builds in time. So it doesn't come in up front. It just takes time to come in. And when it comes in, it's like, wow, I got to have another piece of that. In fact, I probably can't wait till this video's over so I can kind of go through that experience again and really get into it for the other half. Okay, so let's get into the moisture. Now, this is a very moist tomato for a dry tomato. It's a very, very wet tomato. In other words, you look at this tomato, you say, oh, that looks like a dry tomato. But all that moisture is really embedded into the flesh of this tomato. It doesn't look like it's dripping out or anything. It's embedded and it's encapsulated and embodied into the structure of the tomato itself. So once you start eating that, it's going to melt like ice cream in your mouth. It's just going to melt, and all that juice and flavor is going to come out, and you're really going to get a real eye-opener when you get that. It's a nice experience with it. So even though it looks dry, actually this tomato was above that average. We're going to go about a 6, 6.5. That is definitely the sweet spot for moisture. You want to be in that 6 to 6.5 range. This tomato definitely meets that demand, even though it looks like a dry tomato. There was no tardiness or sourness in any way. This was a very mild, neutral, semi-bland flavored type of tomato. It didn't have any kind of tardiness at all. In fact, the tanginess was rather low as well. Undertones. This does have an undertone to it, guys. There is something going on here. Part of that undertone is connected with the flavor aspect of it, but the undertone seemed to be pretty prominent in this particular case. So if I was to give this a number, I'm going to give this a 3 on the undertones. 5 would be really it'd be higher than the taste of the tomato itself, which would be awkward. But this was pretty strong. And it has a really nice kind of an undertone taste, maybe slightly smoky, maybe slightly earthy, but something like that. It didn't have a berry-like type of undertone. This was a little bit of a wild type of an undertone flavor to this tomato, and it went in pretty well. It was a very nice effect, but it was pretty strong. It was getting in that range where I noticed the undertones more almost than the taste of the tomato, the flavor of the tomato itself. So it started going into that area. So yeah, we're going to go with a 3 on those undertones. There is definitely something going on there, which is fine. It's a wilding type of flavor. Texture-wise, we're going to go with about a 4.5. It was a very good body, very good texture on it, but for me, it seemed like it mashed up and almost became creamy a little. Again, I'm not a fan of creamy tomatoes, but it did get a little bit on the creamy side. Not terribly creamy, but it started to get into that area. It wasn't like I was chewing up like a regular store-bought variety of tomato, where that texture of that tomatoes are absolutely perfect. This was a little bit different. It was a little bit on the soft side. Again, that's why I suggest this tomato is probably best for making sauces with rather than salad, because that's part of the reason. It's kind of a soft, almost creamy type of flesh. It was very soft, it melted, but it left like a creaminess to it, like a pasty creaminess. So again, this is probably better for sauce, but it's not going to lower the rating completely on it. Again, I just want to make it 4.5 because there was something going on with that creamy deal. All right, so just keep that in mind. That's why I brought it down a little. Now, production is about average. I'm going to go with a 5 on that. In some cases, I've had production on this tomato a little better than average. But for the most part, I generally get maybe 12 to, if on a good year, maybe 14 tomatoes off it, which is pretty good. But it's nothing terribly high. I mean, I have other varieties of tomatoes that will produce 3-4 times that amount of tomatoes, and good size too, like that. So it's not the most terribly productive variety. The plant gets really long. I mean, a plant can get between 8 and 10 feet long, and a plant that gets 8 and 10 feet long only puts out maybe 12 tomatoes. That's why I say the production wasn't, a 10-foot tall plant should put out like 30, 40, 50 tomatoes. This didn't do that. So to me, it's kind of on the low side, but yeah, for this particular variety of tomato, I'm going to say that it's about average, maybe a little lower than average. So with production-wise, I'm probably going to go with about a 4.5 on the production. Now the skins, well, that could be a little hard too. Skins sometimes chew up pretty nicely, but because this particular variety of tomato has a soft flesh type of an effect to it, the skins didn't break up very nicely. So I wasn't very impressed with the skins being slightly on the tough side. I did have to spit a couple of them out, mainly because I'm doing a video, but it was slightly on the tougher skin side for me. The inside was too soft, and the outside skin was a little stronger than that should have been. So because of that reason, I'm going to go with a 2 on the skins. It was a little lower than average. Average would have been 2.5, with the highest being, highest rating means you don't even know that you chewed skins on it. A skinless tomato, basically. But we're going to go just slightly below average. I wasn't too impressed with a few skins in my mouth. And anytime I get that, I have to let you know. I'm not going to keep it out of the review. Now, as far as seeds go, we're going to go a little lower than the average on the seeds because this isn't a heavy seed variety. Though it does produce seeds, you are going to get some seed for it. But it's not a heavily seeded variety. Again, this is a hallmark and classic for making sauces. And as you can see, it just makes some seeds on the middle on the inside, and it doesn't make a terribly high amount of seeds. So it's very easy to deseed this tomato in the event you want to deseed it. So when we're talking about a 0 to 10, we're not rating how good or bad it is. That has nothing to do with the value of how I'm going to rate the tomato altogether. I'm just giving you a 0 to 10, with 5 being the average amount of seeds in the tomato. Whereas if I rate it really low, it just means doesn't mean it's a bad tomato. It just means it's a very low seed producing variety of tomato. It's, in other words, some people like to make sauces. They don't want to grow tomatoes that have a lot of seeds in them. They want tomatoes that are more flesh. And so this particular variety of tomato is more of a somewhat lower seed variety. So with that said, we're going to rate that at about, I would probably say about a 4 on the seeds. I think that would be appropriate for this tomato. It's a little lower than average. You're going to get more tomato flesh than seeds is basically how I'm rating it. So that's it. That's really basically it for the seed number. So how do I rate the Zapotec tomato from a 1 being the highest? I would probably rate this tomato at about a 2.5, which is actually pretty high. Mainly because even though there were some of these things were generally low, and you would probably say, dude, that should be a lower rating. The reason why I'm not rating it lower is, again, I'm a sauce. I like to make sauces, and I look for tomatoes specifically for sauces. Belmonte is another tomato that makes a great sauce. It's a puriform tomato. It's a classic sauce variety tomato. Can you eat it in salads? Of course you can. But that's not why I'm growing that particular variety of tomato. I'm growing it so I can make several jars of sauce for during the winter months, and I can have homemade tomato sauce during the winter months. So that's why I may grow certain tomatoes. This is one of those tomatoes. This particular variety of tomato is more of a sauce variety tomato. And for me, just because some of these other numbers didn't match up, when you make tomato sauce, basically the reviews that I'm doing on these tomatoes as a fresh tomato, they kind of go out the window, because once you make the tomato sauce, that flavor is really going to transition over to the taste of, well, tomato sauce. Tomato sauce tastes quite different than a fresh tomato in every aspect. I don't care what tomato it is you grow. Once you start cooking that tomato down, it takes on a new characteristic of flavor, and it's just a different experience altogether. You can't compare apples and oranges here. Tomato sauce is a totally different experience than eating raw tomatoes, and I just need to make sure we understand that. This particular variety of tomato, in my opinion, is a really good tomato sauce tomato, and that's why I'm kind of keeping it up on the high end. Yeah, some of these numbers were really out, and it should have got a lower rating technically, but because this is more of a sauce tomato, these numbers are going up, because this is what you're going to do with this tomato. Yes, you can eat it raw in your salad if you want. In my opinion, it's a sin to not make tomato sauce out of it, because the flavor of this thing is absolutely incredible as a tomato sauce. And believe me, I've made tomato sauce with these tomatoes already. I grow a lot of preiform type tomatoes specifically for making sauce. I'm looking for that signature sauce. And I grow this tomato, and I've grown it in the past before, and again, it's going to give you that great sauce flavor. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm clear on why I'm kind of giving it a higher rating than you probably would have said. Well, that was low, that's low, this was that, and that was that, and this is all out. And well, it's because it's a sauce tomato, guys. That's what I'm kind of really rating it on. So really, that's about it, guys. What I'll do is whatever information I got on the Zapotec tomato, I'll put in the description below. I will also put a link in the description below where it'll take you over to the website, hrseeds.com, where you can actually buy the seeds and give this tomato a grow for yourself. Maybe you want to try making tomato sauce for yourself. This would be a tomato that you'd want to use to actually fool around with making tomato sauce. All right? So that's it. That was your tomato review for the Zapotec tomato. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.